And we're back. I'm Professor Scott Plum with the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
The sale is moving forward nicely. We've had some great discovery sessions and have put together a solid proposal. Now, as you're discussing the details, you hit a snag. One of the key influencers raises an objection. How do you deal with it? What answer do you give? Handling key objections should be a part of your preparation as you move toward the close of a sale. So put on your helmets and tighten your chin straps as Scott and I discuss handling the big objections and much more on episode 438 of the Get in the Door podcast.
Well, Bill, it's hard to believe we've done 40 or 38 of these shows already since
We'll hit
March.
number 40 by the end of the year, I think. It would be right on 40. So
Wow.
it'll be fun.
Every week, folks. Boy, it's a little bit of work for Bill and I, but we pull through, and I was going to try to convince him to take some time off over the holidays, but he already scheduled us, so we're going to continue to roll.
I mean, we haven't come to blows yet either, so that's
no, that's probably it.
Some verbal fisticuffs here.
Right. Send me to my room anytime, Bill. I'd be fine with that for a while.
That's right. I hear that happened to you a lot as you were growing up.
Yeah, it did. It gave me really time to think.
I was the youngest, so my mother thought I was wonderful.
I was the oldest, so I encouraged him to have
You got
more.
in trouble all the time.
No, that's true. Yeah.
You were responsible for all the lots.
Oh, that's therapy sessions on responsibility for me. More than one. If you're anybody that's the oldest, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
That's right. That's
All
right. I live by charm alone.
Our topic today in the book club, Beyond Selling Value, is Chapter 11, Seal the Deal, the closing presentation. And this is a shorter chapter, and I just really struggled with the need for it, Bill. I always kind of thought that the closing and presentation and the presentation are all part of the same thing. And maybe the context of the book and the context of the chapter is a little different than my practice or what I've been raised, but it's obviously a step that salespeople need to accomplish because we're asking for the commitment.
Right.
And sometimes I think a presentation should really be a summary of everything that we've talked about, and it should not include anything that we have not talked about. And I think a good position of a presentation is we're going to show you everything that we're able to do. We're going to address some of the specific issues that we've talked about. We don't ever want to say the word problem because people don't like talking about problems. And at the end of the presentation, if there's a reason that you find that we're not able to work together, or you want to elaborate on something a little bit, or you want us to elaborate on something, then we can talk about that. But this is just a confirmation of everything that we've talked about. And if there's no reason not to proceed, we will assume that that is an affirmative to continue. I like that position.
I don't think that's any different than what they're saying here, really.
Okay.
This is where we've take the cumulative knowledge that we've learned, the conversations that we've had, and I call it the proposal step, where I've actually written something down, and now this is close to the document. The business presentation that we talked about last week is really our first big presentation before the decision maker, or in some cases, the decision-making team. From that, we might have a few more meetings, and then we start to put together the proposal. And what I tell people, next time I get together, I'm going to bring you a solid document, have all the numbers, it'll have all the commitments, but it's not cast in stone. It can still have some flex to it, so that we make sure that we hit all the things. But this fits in with my process of the closing presentation of the formal proposal, the written document that says, here's where we're going, and here's what the costs are going to be, and here's how we move forward. As you talk about the implementation step, it contains all the implementation material.
Yeah. And I think we need to be able to talk about implementations that are not perfect, and most of them aren't. There's reasons that come up.
Maybe yours aren't.
Well, I think reality hits as soon as the commitment is approved. It's all of a sudden you get people that come up with excuses.
You're saying the honeymoon's over and the marriage has started.
Not everybody is on board. And sometimes the decision makers in the room kind of trickle information down to other people that are involved, and sometimes other people involved don't know what's going on. So they put up with some resistance. They don't want to change. They don't want to study a new system. They don't want to look at a new manual. They know how the thing works. They've been working with the same water pump for the last 20 years. Why would we ever want to upgrade to something that's digital when we know exactly what happens with this one? And when it's wrong, we know exactly, we know how to fix it. So not everybody wants to change. So
That's right. Well, and I sometimes, I don't know if you've ever run into this. I remember a situation where where my analysis was wrong. So I was doing a class on negotiation, and the vice president pulled me in and he said, let's do this negotiation program. My people are bad at negotiating. They collapse at the end. And so I put this program together. I didn't talk to any of the people. I only talked to the vice president. And then I went in and did the class, and everybody's sitting there stone-faced at me like I'm an idiot. Right. And I finally said, okay, so what am I doing wrong? They said, we're not the one who collapses. It's the vice president who collapses.
Yeah.
If we don't give in, they'll just go over our heads, and then he'll give them whatever they want.
Sure.
So then I had to reanalyze and kind of talk to them about the situation. And then, of course, I was young enough. I made the mistake of going and telling the vice president that he was the problem, and that was the last I ever.
Thanks for stopping by, Bill. We've got some door prizes for you backstage. Have a good day.
So we implemented, the wrong program to the wrong person, and of course he wasn't in the room at the time because he knew everything. So you know what, you learn from those things. But you're right. You can do everything right and implement the wrong thing, or people aren't on board. So. Yeah, this is an important step for making sure that we're moving forward, but there still may be glitches as you move the process forward after the commitment to buy has been made.
Yeah. When we're looking at implementation and the execution of the agreement, we have to also recognize there are certain hard deadlines and soft deadlines, and there's a timeline that has to be agreed upon and followed. And sometimes you're going to be able to work with your prospect, who's now your client, because they gave you a commitment, that there are things that they're going to have to do in order to stay on their timeline. And
even more interesting that I find, and I'm curious about your opinion on this, but quite often the salesperson drops out of the picture, and this is all turned over to an implementation team. And this is a step I see quite often in the process that gets screwed up in organizations, is that move from sales to implementation. And not enough communication is done about what promises were made and what the whole plan looks like. And then there's a lot of issues that can come up, and the salesperson gets called because they were the middle person on this deal, but they're not involved in the implementation. Have you found that with some of your clients?
I have, and I think the salesperson should always be involved in the implementation, and they need to be held accountable to the conversations that they've had and the expectations that they've created with the client at this point. And the salesperson probably has the most influence on the client because there's the most trust and rapport that is established there. And the salesperson needs to always remember that they are representing their client, who is their employer at this point. There's the client that the salesperson works with, but the salesperson has got to remain loyal to their employer.
Right.
And always represent the employer and always back up the team that is implementing the system, and not ever turn on them and try to represent the client in something where the client is wrong. Yeah. Or needs clarification, or they need to fix it. It's not something that the employer or the company that the salesperson represents has to fix it.
Yeah, so what you're saying, there's a lot of opportunity for failure here, but a lot of clients that I talk to, the salesperson moves on and everything is handed over to another team.
Well, it's
even if it's inside sales. So
it's misunderstandings one way or another. I mean,
misunderstandings happen, and this has been known to happen. The salespeople sometimes, in their enthusiasm, commit to things that the company can't do.
Right. So, they do. And they always want to make a sale. So sometimes they say things to make a sale and they hope that, nobody ever finds the body. And all of a sudden the body starts, some dog was digging in the backyard and found the body. And all of a sudden the salesperson is then held accountable for that and has to explain, what did you say to him? Why did you say that? What were you thinking? And then all of a sudden the conversation changes a little bit, and some adaptations need to be made, etc.
So I've just added to our list of future topics from sales to implementation, kind of the handoff.
Yeah, it's a very good topic.
That's an important topic. But any other thoughts on this closing presentation? I think it's necessary, but you feel like it's more the close just happens.
The presentation, I think, for me, the presentation is where you lay out the plan, you address all the solutions, you don't talk about anything that hasn't been talked about already. It's really a confirmation of a conversation.
Yep.
And we need to set the precedent that if there's no reason to continue, then we will consider this a formal agreement and we will proceed.
Right.
And they need to really come up with a reason not to proceed. And, that's our next topic is on objections. But I think we need to really look at it as this is going forward unless you say something differently.
Excellent.
And frame it that way.
All right, good. Well, my issue with it is I can't remember the last time. I mean, I've stood to do presentations before and I love to do that. But when I get into the closing presentation, I'm usually sitting down and going over a document with them. And they do like to stand up and present, feeling that it gives them a little bit more power. But I think that makes it feel confusing to a lot of salespeople that it's almost too formal. And now we should be working as a team rather than me presenting this. So unless I have a room full of people, I'm not going to stand and present.
So our book giveaway is a new book put up by the same authors. It's called Breaking the Rules, 111 Tips for Selling Value in an Era of Procurement. And our most recent winner is Anita Gakis. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But Anita, I know
we'll slaughter
you are.
Names sometimes.
Yeah.
Johnson and Smith, we got pretty good. But
right. So
congratulations, Anita. I think she's in Chicago, but I could be wrong.
I think you're right.
She signed up by linking in with us.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed her comments. So thanks for listening, Anita.
And we have another book coming up that we're going to do a book study on, though, right?
Yeah. Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz.
Dr. Maxwell
Maltz. Yeah. This segment has been brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program, presented by your host of Get in the Door podcast. Business is heating up, and now is the time to get back on the selling track. While others wait for the market to improve, prospects and opportunities await you now. Perhaps you want to be more productive on your prospecting, or you'd like to increase your closing percentage. Maybe having meetings online is not as comfortable as being in person. Sales reps are telling us they need some honest accountability and skill development to rise above the competition. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why the host of Get in the Door podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Hellkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. For only $495, you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us your insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. After your 1-hour online session to jumpstart your coaching process, you will receive 5 more half-hour individual coaching sessions to enable you to make improvements over time and create new habits. Most salespeople make their money back with just one sale. Go to getinthedoorpodcast.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself and invest in your future.
So our main topic today is handling the big objections. And as we said in the opening, it's almost inevitable that sometime in the sales process, a customer is going to ask a question, going to challenge us, throw up some kind of a barrier that we have to deal with. So we can call these objections, but they can be a blockade to moving the sale forward if we don't handle them properly. And we want to discuss how you can handle some of the most challenging objections that you face. So we picked out 6, 3 that I'm going to talk about, 3 that Scott's going to talk about. But I want to talk first about some common ideas, Scott, that we think about before objections. And because I don't want to keep saying the same thing on every objection, you know what I mean?
Sure,
like on every objection, we could say, you probably didn't provide the proper information or ask the right questions, and that objection's coming up because you missed something in the process, right?
Right.
I think we could say that about almost any objection. You didn't find out about stuff in the process. So you shouldn't be surprised by an issue because you didn't think about it. So Scott, what are some of the general rules or thoughts you have about objections themselves?
I think salespeople have a natural tendency to want to talk about everything that they know. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that we need to be influential and not always informational. And instead of sharing information and demonstrating our product knowledge, and it adds tremendous amount of confidence, but we need to be influential and not always informational. Yeah. An objection is a buying sign. And if somebody's bringing up an objection, and keep in mind, you must be present to win, it's an unasked question. And you're there, they're there, they're bringing it up. That's a buying sign. They want to remove it.
It's an opportunity, right?
As much as you do. Yeah. It's a topic. They're bringing up a topic. And
and they can seem negative. sometimes the way that the person might say it. Do you do this? Or, but it really, as you say, it's a buying sign. So if you handle it properly, it can be the very reason that they should buy.
A side note on that. Prospects that give you unpolished statements or questions are confident in the relationship, and they don't have to polish it up to deliver it to you. They're just being crass. And that's great, because the more honest they are with you, the easier it is for you to find out their intentions and to be able to have that same type of trust-oriented conversation. If they're really polished and they're really concerned about how they're coming off, you may not have that trust and rapport. So don't misinterpret the bluntness of prospects. And when they're sharing information with you, they're sharing information. We love information.
And if they're not asking, if there's questions they have, they're not asking, they're just going to leave you go because they don't care.
They're just going to wait for it to end. This is going to be over with soon. I got to get home for dinner. And
there's
so do
too many
they.
objections. I'm really not interested. So,
all right. And then also keep in mind, debriefing your calls. And when you're hearing a frequent objection and it's something that is common, you're saying or asking something that's triggering an objection. You're triggering a concern by something you're saying or asking that the prospects are then wanting clarification on. And sometimes that is based on the areas that you emphasize. I really find that when somebody calls me on a recorded line, I shut down. And how many times do we get a cold call? I'm calling you from a recorded line. I'm going, oh my goodness, is there an investigation? Is my mom on the other line? Is she going to listen to it? Are you going to give us the attorney?
Recorded my call.
And on a side note, I love it. We're recording this for training and development purposes. I said, good. Tell me when you're ready. We can debrief when it's all over with.
I'll help you if you really want to know.
All right.
Well, I think that one of the things they should make sure they're doing is only handling the key objections, because you've got to ask questions to drive deeper. So often we might get I don't like the color. Okay, well, in addition to the color, what else would be holding up the project, right? Or what is it about the color you find objectionable? Don't just take we can do it in blue, green, and red, right? Instead of asking more and trying to find out why this is important to them, we start blathering on. And this is where you talk about don't just be informational. Don't be quick to answer every question. Find out why they're asking it, why it's important. Well, I don't like the color. Why? Well, I had a car that color once. And okay, well, we got to take personal preference out of this and start looking at what is selling the most in the marketplace or whatever. Right. So find out why you have that objection. A couple other things. Look for ways that answering the question can gain you something. I remember I ran into this situation when I was in retail. I had a guy running me all over the stores, putting different stereo systems together. And when it all got done, he goes, thanks, man. And he left. And my store is in a shambles. And I think if you ask a question, if they say, well, I have a problem with this. Well, if I can deal with that problem, can we move the sale forward? Right. Instead of just saying, okay, well, I can answer that and I can answer that. Are you getting something for each answer? Well, Bob, if I can come up with a way that we can hit your price objections or deal more effectively with the features that you're talking about, is that the last thing that you need to move the project forward? And if they say no, then it's not really that big of a deal, is it?
So I think we need to keep in mind, Bill, if I could just interject this, is that when you're responding to the objections and you're putting all the pressure on yourself, well, if I could show you a way, or if I could fix it. And sometimes the prospect needs to adapt and to be able to put the responsibility onto them, because sometimes they have to be the ones that need to change and the salesperson can't. The salesperson is not in a position to change in some areas. And the prospect needs to be able to contemplate and reflect on what they're getting and the chance of them losing it if they continue with all these objections and not getting what they really want and losing the sale. And sometimes when salespeople just kind of scratch their head and they're silent and they give prospects a chance to think about their objection, it's possible that a prospect will answer their own objection, given the opportunity for a little bit of silence and contemplation. And they're the ones that need to change and adapt, not the salesperson.
So often we're putting too much pressure on ourselves. I got to answer this. I got to answer this. I got to answer this. So look for other ways
Yeah.
to deal with it.
If there was a way for this to happen, or if there was a way we could come up with this, what would happen next? And then
Right.
bring the future to the present, and then get the next step defined. And I'm telling you, if the prospect doesn't know what the next step is, they had no intentions of buying.
Yeah.
Period. I mean,
all right, well, let's go into some of these big objections.
Okay.
We're going to run out of time here.
Yep.
So my first one is price or funding, right? And I think price is always the first objection, because even if I really want it, I might as well try and get it cheaper. So whenever I'm buying something, the first thing I'll say is, hey, can you give me a cheaper price? And I'm just amazed at how many times the salesperson says, sure.
Yeah.
So that means they got too much fluff in it anyway. So that's my assumption.
Mm-hmm.
The price objection is almost always too expensive. I have seldom had them ask me to raise the price. So that's just a thought. But I really think you need to ask questions. Why don't you understand the value proposition? What is it about what I'm bringing to the table that you don't understand that makes you think this should be cheaper than it is? And are there any value items maybe that they haven't mentioned that we need to discuss more because they're not seeing the value in it, or I thought they might value it and they don't?
When I hear the price objection, I say, that's my fault. And I didn't do a good enough job of explaining everything that's included in this proposal. Let's go back. And have you considered this? And have you considered this? And there's something that I didn't include, but I is a clarification on this, or an addition of this. And I think sometimes
so you're really driving toward what is the value? The
value, what is most valuable to them?
Yep.
And
you didn't discover it, perhaps, or they're just blowing smoke because, again, they're happy with the value proposition, but they want to try and see,
or they naturally are going to flinch every time you give them a price. And, negotiators always love to flinch. They always think everything's negotiable.
They're taught flinching in my negotiation
everything
class.
Is negotiating. Yeah.
Or groaning.
Yeah.
Ooh, that hurts. Ooh.
I was really hoping we'd be able to do this, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen today.
My favorite one is, you're going to have to do better than that. It's like, why? So yeah, there are some negotiation tactics that salespeople don't know about because you don't believe in teaching them negotiation.
Well, I don't think salespeople should be always negotiating. They should be selling.
Well, they're also dropping the prices, not negotiating. So.
Or adding value.
That's right. Well, sometimes you can add value that doesn't cost you anything. So, and sometimes you can hold things in reserve to add later. Right. So you can. You don't have to give everything up front. And then they say, well, we want it cheaper. How about if we did this? You talked about, it could be terms or something like that. And that can be a selling point. So
exactly.
All right. What's your first big objection?
There's a delay. They're too busy. It's not in the right time. And I think that is probably a reflection of the discovery step, the questions, the getting to that emotional level of questions where we're creating urgency in the discovery step of the sales process to really uncover and discover, why do they want to do this? Why do they want to do this now? What would happen if they didn't do it? What would happen if they didn't start today?
I think that's what are you losing if you wait another 3 months, 6 months, 9 months?
And for salespeople, their tone has to be really of a interest and curiosity, not of a pushy, polished salesperson. They need to say, I'm kind of curious. I mean, why do you want to start this now? Is there a deadline that you want to make sure that you achieve, or is there a high school graduation that you want to make sure that everything's put in order by, or what is it? And then you're really getting them to uncover their motivation as to why they're starting it now. I mean, why didn't they call you last week or last month, or why didn't they wait until call you next month? Something happened today that they called you, or you called them, and all of a sudden they're interested.
What do we do if we're in the middle of the sale and they say, well, it looks really good, but we're going to put it off for 6 months?
You see, I'm kind of confused. When we started talking about this was the reason that you wanted to do this now. Has that changed?
Okay.
And now you're just simply using information that you already acquired in the conversation. There's one thing that prospects don't like about salespeople, and that's salespeople being assumptive. Right. So think about, what information do you need to know when you start a conversation with them, and what objections do you want to prevent from coming up by getting the information sooner? So
and if you didn't ask those questions, now you're behind the 8 ball because you don't have a reason, and now they've made the objection, and they're going to be less likely to tell you why they might need to do it now.
Right. They have you on the run.
Yep. And
you're on the run.
that's right. You're in a defensive position now.
Yep.
So, all right, good. My second one is I need someone else's input, the boss's input, the team's input. And I think this is the best evidence that you've been selling to the wrong person or people. You didn't ask the question earlier, in addition to you, who else is part of the final decision? If you don't know who the decision-making team is, you miss something very early in the sales process. But if it's caught you now, you got to determine who the other people are and why they weren't brought into the decision earlier. So I need to talk to my boss. Well, why have we been talking about this when your boss was going to make the decision? And then the last thing is now you have to try to get into that conversation with the decision maker, whether it's the boss or the team, and because they're not going to represent your product as well as you would represent your product.
Right. And there needs to be some costs and consequences of inaction for a prospect not sharing the information with other people. Sometimes the prospect at that point wants to be the hero and they want to bring the solution to the boss and get credit for it. Well, you now understand the culture within that company, so you need to be able to adapt to it. And you need to be able to make your contact the hero that they end up bringing the solution to.
And they talked about that in Beyond Selling Value, right? If you get to go around them, then you bring them into that conversation and make them the hero.
Right. And he's going to follow he's going to do all the heavy lifting too.
That's right.
Takes the pressure off the decision maker going, oh, Larry, if you're going to do all the heavy lifting and you're just going to bring information to me, and I don't want you to be spending a lot of time on it where this is the only thing that you're working on because you have plenty of other responsibilities. So don't make the prospect that you're working with a full-time employee of you as a salesperson getting everything done, because your boss, the decision maker, is not going to like that because their productivity is going to go down at the same time.
Okay. What's your next objection?
They have a contract with another supplier, and these are usually their 2 or 3 or 5 year contracts. And sometimes there's a clause in there where there's a certain amount of service and quality that needs to be delivered. And if that's starting to deteriorate, there's a way for the contract to be null and void. I would always like to see the contract and say, would you mind sharing the contract with me? I'd just like to be able to take a look at it and see, what some of the terms are.
What they promised, right?
Yeah. And boy, that's really great competitive information, is to have your competitor's contract as part of your resource library of what it's like to work with those companies. Sometimes you can work on getting a new contract and avoiding the old one, and they end up transferring the service to you. Sometimes you have to wait. Follow up with them 6 months or a year, depending on when the service and the contract expires, and also keep track of all the prospects that you have that have contracts with that company. If that company shows up in the news one day and they filed bankruptcy, or they've been acquired, or there's been fraud, you now can go in and say, hey, why don't we start a new conversation with them? And maybe they're going to be in a position where they're going to be a little bit more adaptive to letting some business go just for goodwill and just for PR sake too.
Well, if you have gotten far in the sales process, if they've let you get into the sales process where you're, somewhere near the close, and then they bring up this contract stuff, they knew about that all along. So why did they let this go this far? That means they're interested in breaking that contract. Otherwise, they wouldn't let this go. This would be the objection you get on the phone call versus the objection you get after you've done all the discovery and you're making presentations.
It probably should be one of the first questions that you ask when you have a discovery meeting after you set the appointment and you're sitting down or you're on the call, the first scheduled call together, is when is the agreement up with your current provider? And depending on what industry you're in, if there's contracts, if it's telecom, if it's uniform services, if it's other businesses like that,
you better know who
contracts.
The competitors are.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things too, the earlier you are in the sales process, the easier it is to get information. Once you start getting into the close, they're starting to think about negotiating position. And you're going to be less likely to get good information because they're going to hold those cards closer to their vest. The other way to get good information is to use other team members. Quite often, like if I'm in a technical sale, like a computer sale, I'll say, can I get our techs to talk to your techs about some of the issues and things they're dealing with? And techs will, the people in those positions will tell almost anything to each other, that then that information can be brought back to you. So don't always be the only conduit for information. Let your experts talk to their experts, and then you can find out some things that they won't tell you in sales because you're a sales guy.
Right. Good advice.
All right. My third one is we need different features, colors, designs, whatever. Right. And again, you screwed up somewhere in discovery in not finding out what they really wanted. If this is a surprise, we can say that about any of these objections. You screwed up in discovery somewhere. If this is happening during discovery, it's great. As you mentioned earlier, one of these, we'd like a different color. Hey, if you want a different color, that's pretty easy compared to, we don't like your stuff at all. Mm-hmm. So it's a great buying sign. Give them a chance to open up about their needs and ask a lot of those questions. Ask a lot of why questions. Why don't you like the color? Why don't you like the feature? Is this really a preference, or is it just kind of a functionality issue? How will that feature be used? And then the one other thing to do is listen for features that are unique to your competitor, right? So if you're selling farm implements and they say, well, I really like, green and yellow, you got a John Deere person on your hands, and you may not be able to make yours green and yellow because you're selling red farm equipment. But sometimes those objections are plants from the other competitors saying, hey, if they can't do this, then that's why you should continue to work with us. So listen to those feature issues real closely to think about where they're coming from.
If I can add something on that, Bill, when you talk about why questions, we have to be somewhat cautious on those because they're emotional questions, and sometimes the prospect can get very defensive because they're defending a current decision. Every why question is defending a previous decision that was made. So think about rewriting those to what or how questions, or what makes green important, or how did we get upon green as the color that you need to have. And now you're finding out more information. You're not getting the prospect to be defensive, and you're still getting the same information, but it's a question that begins with what or how.
All right, good. And what's your last objection?
When they say, send me the contract, send me the information and I'll look it over. And this is usually a stall, a put off, and you need to really project a timeline saying, well, if I get it out today and it arrives in 2 days, when do you think you'll have a chance to look at it?
And when can we talk about,
the next day, or, what are some of the things that you want to make sure that are in the information? If you're just having a conversation and they say, send me information, and you say, I don't know what to send you. Right. Because we haven't really talked about what's most important to you. I really like to be able to give you information that's most important to you, or to deal with some misconceptions or some skepticism that you have.
You ever worked with an information sender? I had a person I used to work with, and man, she would send out a 3-inch packet of catalogs and books and information. And I thought, man, when are they ever going to read all that? But they allowed her to do that because it allowed them to put it off.
Right. Right.
I don't think they ever looked at anything.
And then if you're not going to follow up, don't send it out. You might as well just, write the envelope, put the address on it, and throw it in the trash. Just, seal it up and throw it right in the trash. Yeah, save the stamp. Or, if you really want to cost yourself a lesson, put a stamp on it and throw it in the trash. If you're not going to follow up, don't send it out. You really have to follow up. And that's where I see so many breakdowns. And here's the biggest problem these days is emails. Salespeople send emails and they never schedule a follow-up call to an email. They assume that the prospect is going to return the email or respond to the email or answer the questions.
Throw 1,000 out to the wind with their response package. Exactly. I get so many of these on LinkedIn. It's like another note from this guy. It's the same thing. And, I'm really not that close to you that I want you to examine my business. And you've given me no reason really to do it.
Yeah. But look as a practice, a general practice, maybe every day or once a week, salespeople, look through your sent folder at emails that you've sent that you haven't heard back from people. And, or every time you send an email to a prospect, copy yourself on it, blind copy yourself on it, put it in a folder, and then review that folder daily of those emails that you haven't heard back from. But you've got to follow up on emails that you send, because there was a reason you sent it. There was a reason you composed that email and sent it. It didn't cost you anything financially. It did cost you an opportunity maybe, or cost you time. You still need to make good time trades. Period.
I think in the old days, I would have sent out, or I wouldn't have ever sent out a contract. I would meet with them instead. I would never make my final close over the phone, but I think things have changed now because of the lack of contact with people. So we're doing a lot more over the phone. So I might send out a contract, but certainly we're going to go over it together. So those are the 6 that we picked. If you've got other ones you'd like us to talk about, I'll just go over those quickly. Price and funding, boss's input or team's input. We need different features, colors, designs. There's some kind of delay. I'm too busy. It's not the right time. We have a contract with another supplier, or send me the contract or information and I will look it over. So Scott, your resource?
I've got a video. It's a little bit longer. It's kind of an interview type question. It's how to sell above the budget.
Oh, I also have a video. It's a 2-minute selling tip number 21, change the value proposition. And if you go there, you can also, I've got about 30 other videos too that you can take a look at. They're all about a couple minutes long. So this segment of the Get in the Door podcast is brought to you by The Art of Prospecting, your guide to getting in the door by Steve Kloida. Steve Kloida was known internationally for increasing salespeople's ability to make solid appointments with qualified prospects. You too can learn this essential skill by ordering a copy of his superb book, The Art of Prospecting, your guide to getting in the door. In this book, Steve shares the top strategies and tactics he has developed, implemented, and personally tested with more than 1 million sales and prospecting calls. You can get his book on the website, theprospectingexpert.com. In addition, check out his other great online resources. Instant Sales Coaching, which will guide you through 5 online success modules. A guided prospecting process entitled Call Reluctance Transformer, and the Magnetic Selling Strategies Workbook, a detailed step-by-step guide to increasing your sales. Get any of these valuable resources at theprospectingexpert.com.
So our golden nugget today, as everybody knows, it's a loyal listener. I love Plato, and I was reading a lot of his quotes the other day, and I'm like, wow, these are really good life quotes. Life quotes. I'm trying to keep it a little bit more specific to the role of sales. And here's a quote from Plato. Human behavior flows from 3 main sources: desire, emotion, and knowledge.
So I don't know if that's valid because that was humans 2,500 years ago. So people have changed, right?
No, I think those are 3 basic ingredients. I think we all have to have desire, and you've met people, salespeople that have no desire. We've met them that have no emotion, and we've certainly met them where they have no knowledge.
Well, and I thought about it from our customer standpoint, right? We need to figure out what is motivating people in order to be effectively providing them with the right thing.
Right. What do they need to know and what do they need to do? And I think that that's the essence of salespeople is what do you need to know and what do you need to do? And if you're spending your time learning and not applying, it's like plowing and never planting.
Okay, you can find all this information, all the links at getinthedoorpodcast.com. All of our show notes will be there, and you can click on that, fill out the form so that you can get in the drawing for our next book, which is Breaking the Rules, 111 Tips for Selling Value in the Era of Procurement.
And we'll be covering Chapter 12 in the book, Beyond Selling Value, Every Shot a Bullseye, Target Opportunities Selection. So stay tuned for that. And we're going to have a special guest. Dr. Terry Wu is going to be talking about why the mind buys. And I've known Terry for a few years. Very insightful, very knowledgeable. I assure you, as you listen to this podcast, you're going to want to take notes and you're going to want to look at opportunities of applying what you learned during that interview. So make sure that you tune in.
Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.